Hello and welcome back to the Academy of the Magical Art. I am Prater Ophiel. This is part 2 of a two-part series I'm doing on the master numbers 11 through 99. If you haven't already watched part 1, which is an explanation of what master numbers are and how they affect us, please go ahead and do that before listening any farther or going any farther on this video, because it kind of sets the stage for what we're about to discuss. Okay, so starting with the number of 11. Looking at master numbers, we can see different polarities of that number taking effect in the person's life. We see positives, negatives, or that number being in harmony. We will call that the assertive aspect, the passive aspect, or the harmonious aspect. The assertive aspect of the number 11, which is the number of revelation, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So this is a little bit more of a feminine number. So with the assertive aspects, we see a tendency to be a little bit oversensitive, especially to social opinion. They can be fanatical. They hold on to what they believe really, really tightly, and that can have a tendency to lead into overzealousness. When we see that number 2 or the 11 popping up, it can take a little bit of the practical realizations about life down. Those aren't possessed as significantly. And when they are holding on to their viewpoints, they will have a tendency to attack other viewpoints, becoming very, very polarized. Even looking at the number 11, we see two poles. If you were to add a cross at the top and a cross at the bottom, you'd see the Roman numeral 2, which ironically is the symbol for Gemini. Okay, so when we see Gemini, the twins within itself, we literally see a little bit of a bipolar tendency there. So when the 11 jumps onto its pole and doesn't stay in the middle pillar, speaking in terms of polarity, they become very, very attached to that polarity and will defend it at all costs. However, 11s have a lot of psychic and divine gifts. They have a really, really strong sense for self-purpose. They love ideals. They love humanity. It's a feminine number, and the number of the moon, the number of water, the number of emotions. So everything is about feeling. The passive aspects of 11, we see insensitivity to established social norms. So those normals that we see in society just don't make sense. We see that with a lot of the numbers. There can be nervous disorders, anxiety, social phobias, having a tendency to overreact to criticism, being a little bit apathetic. The passive side can fear higher energies, almost be apprehensive to step into their divine purpose and be apprehensive to move anywhere really on either pole, mainly because of the oversensitivity to public reaction and other people's viewpoints about them. Now, when we see this number harmonized, when we see the person truly step into the vibration of the 11, you see a literal mediator between the two worlds. Somebody who wants to heal civil wrongs, somebody who stops caring so much what other people think and they care about what the divine think, because you become the bridge. Very, very gifted at channeling and clairvoyance, releasing illusions, seeking to express higher consciousness and uniting spiritual truth to the material plane. Very, very inventive, visionary leaders have great, tremendous gifts with sight. Moving on to the number 22. With 22, 2 plus 2 equals 4. So we see the sacred structure number, the number that is about that balance. This time we'll start off with the passive aspects. So people that have this 22, but it's really, really diminished, it hasn't been brought out at all. Will have fear of their natural powers, will be very disorganized, very apathetic towards human needs, kind of cut off from emotion. There will be a lot of inner stress, so that they have, at the extreme uses of heightened awareness, there you'll see tendencies towards criminal goals or black magic because of that desire to be against the norm so much. There is a tendency to jump onto the left-handed path. So there's a very, very hard time adapting, especially to group needs, and sometimes can struggle with a little bit of jealousy. When you see the number overactivated to assertive, you'll see people that have a tendency to overstep proper boundaries. They'll be envious of others' accomplishments and have a tendency to over-evaluate their own self-importance, which oftentimes leads to depression disorders. They'll exaggerate information and personal credentials. They just caught a 6-inch fish, but man, that thing was 1.5 feet long. They will promote hasty causes, resenting lack of recognition, and have a tendency to misuse power or wisdom. But again, when that number finally comes into balance and a lot of those lessons are learned, and you see the true mastery of the 22 come out, you see somebody who is always looking at the higher planes and administrating things with a lot of integrity. They are all about manifesting the divine intent into the world and integrating higher wisdom, higher knowledge and understanding. They have a tendency to be very, very in control of themselves. They like to be in control of their environment. They'll put universal goals ahead of their own self, and ahead of their own pride. And again, you see somebody who's a mystic, but they're very, very practical. I know a lot of people that started off in the metaphysical arts, if you will, with really, really good intent, took a huge left turn onto the left-handed path. That wasn't really for them, and then drifted right back into the middle and found a balance there, having experienced the quote-unquote dark, that pole firsthand. Not only makes them unafraid of it, but willing to step into it if need be. But on the other hand, their true purpose, their true intent is not to serve themselves, but it's to serve those around them, so that they can utilize the best of both worlds without any fear, keeping only their goal in mind. It's like the difference, if you go and jump on a channel called The Modern Alchemist. Aubrey discusses this in his one of the videos that he does, and he's discussing Star Wars. And on Star Wars, you have the Jedi and you have the Sith. In the animated series, there is something, a different class, and they're called the Force Wielders. There is no light, there is no dark, there is only Force. That they can do huge, incredible feats, because rather than serving one pole or the other, they simply serve the middle pillar. Anyways, getting back on track. The number 33, you see the number of universal service. So in the assertive aspects of the 33, you have somebody that is really, really good at playing the martyr or the victim, projecting personal dysfunction onto others, forcing attempts to serve others, taking on others' pain, really, really empathetic, and having a tendency to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Very, very intolerant of differing mores or opinions, and be very, very over emotional. They won't adjust to the needs of others at all, because they have a tendency to be looking at their own at that point and seeing other people's problems but not including them as part of their own, not really having that recognition of what affects you affects me also. When you see the passive aspects of the 33 that hasn't been brought out or tapped into at all, you see a little bit of a disdain for the sacred, unable to make emotional commitments or services, over protective and rebellious, jealous tendencies, hiding from positions of responsibility, but still seeking praise. Can be the passive martyr, that they are playing the martyr, but they're doing it very, very quietly. Not very good at establishing clear boundaries, resist making changes in the self, worried a lot. They're very, very worried about things. But when you see this number enter into its harmonious aspect, you see excellent wellness administrator, very sympathetic, very good counselor. Again, you see people who are quote-unquote psychics, intuitives, or spiritual workers having 33s. They'll have a concern for the welfare of the masses. It's kind of like taking on the role of the cosmic parent, wanting to take care of everything, understanding that taking care of the children, they're taking care of themselves as well. Creating harmony at home, at work, kind of like the peacemaker role. Leaders and institutions of positive welfare and human service. So the number 44, when you see the passive aspects of the 44 that hasn't really been brought out a whole lot. 4 plus 4 equals 8. So that they will have a lot of good ideas, but that's kind of where they stay. If they do make it out of their head, they'll expect other people to carry them out for them. They won't want to do it themselves. There will be a huge distaste for personal disciplines, very silently critical and envious of successful people, because they know that they have the potential to reach that success. They just don't have the discipline necessary to do it yet. They expect people to respond to his or her ideas, unconscious resistance to responsibility and the personal use of power. But when you see the assertive aspect, the 44 put into overdrive, you'll see somebody who's an unethical administrator, very, very rigid in administering ideas and beliefs, very emotionally insensitive to others. That boss that's okay with staring you in the eye, cussing you out, making you cry, walking away with a smile on their face. So they can be very, very attached to appearance rather than real achievement. Outspoken, critic of authority, forces social change, abuses industrial power, and uses money to control people. But when you see the 44 go into balance, when you see that 44 reach its real harmonization, you see somebody who's an absolute keystone in the building of a group consciousness. Very, very well-trained mental abilities, very, very well-trained disciplines, very, very trusted and trusting of the wisdom of their own inner authority, practical visionary, potential to create new modes of income and prosperity, somebody who combines the artistic aspects of themselves with the practical aspects of themselves. Rather than working and focusing on their own power, they'll help others manifest their empowerment. Again, keeping in mind and serving others and serving those around me, I'm serving myself. 55 is the number of the divine will. Okay, so 55, 5 plus 5 equals 10. So 10 is a 1, which is the number of the sun, the number of source. So with the 55, the passive aspects of 55 will be a person who indulges in really, really long bouts or binges of animus projection with very, very few results, blames fate or other people, not very good at taking responsibility for themselves, part of that ego thing. They won't take responsibility for their own setbacks, very, very passively resistant of the higher divine will. And oftentimes this will create a repressed anger or aggressive actions that all that potential within them, all that potential of the sun bottled up inside eventually will pop. But it'll pop in short, aggressive spurts, kind of like when you put the valve on a pressure cooker, all that steam comes out, shut the valve, it's done again. With the overdrive or the assertive aspects of the 55, see somebody who is confused between true freedom or rebellion. They always are wanting to escape responsibility or commitment. Very, very pessimistic. Having a tendency to indulge in habits while criticizing others for doing the same. Very, very egocentric. Some might even call them narcissistic. Believing that their own opinion is a universal truth and they don't really care what anybody else says about it. Justifies their own faults, finding towards others as a revelation or being impatient. When you see this number harmonize, this becomes somebody who seeks to blend individual will and truth with higher will, being open to other sides of the veil, being open to inner life, a very, very innovative and inventive soul, while inspiring originality in others, bringing out that, being a muse to others, if you will. There's a resolution of karma, communicating with all kingdoms, pioneering new thinking, reform, leading others from tribal dependency to individualized awareness. Very, very dynamic leader this is. So 66. Now I personally have a 66 as my expression number. 6 plus 6 is 12, 1 plus 2 equals 3. So with the assertive aspects of the 66, this is the number of universal joy, by the way. The joining of the sun plus the moon and the product therein. So the assertive aspects of 66 don't really like to admit personal dysfunctions. They force emotional confrontation before others are ready. They have a tendency to confuse emotions, creating an aura of discouragement and despair, being very, very critical of others, almost phobic of their own emotions and insecurities, falsely over-sentimental, seeing oneself as a messiah-like figure, preying upon the emotional weaknesses in others. Passive aspects of the 66 that has gone dormant or hasn't come out yet, has an inability to recognize and admit one's own emotional blocks. A very, very good silent victim. Expects others to read your moods or suffering or pain, just to understand and acknowledge that you're hurting without actually saying so. And will blame the lack of happiness on external people and events, wallowing in negativity and the anima that comes along with that. But when this number finally harmonizes, you see somebody who quote-unquote dances with the angels, very involved in a lot of causes, institutions helping to alleviate human, animal, planetary suffering. managing the spiritual fire. So oftentimes you'll see these people as counselors or healers, inspired artists who work on the archetypal level, bringing the joy of nature and the angels to mankind, positive ray in gloomy endeavors. So when you see 77s, this is the number of creative thought. 7 plus 7 is 14, 1 plus 4 is 5. So although 77, if you watch the video on karmic debt numbers, 7 plus 7 does add up to 14. You see a little bit of that intertwined with the life lessons when the 77 is in the passive stage, but that 14 life lesson is what helps them to elevate to their harmonious consciousness. So at the passive levels, you see somebody who's unsociable, detached, pessimistic about change in human nature, feels caught up in non-creative environments, explains inability to communicate his or her ideas as being ahead of their own times. So somebody doesn't talk about their ideas just because, oh, that's too advanced for you. They want recognition and fear the pleasures of the body and denies emotions. Now 5 is the number of feeling. So when you see that feeling completely detached, it's generally because they're afraid of feeling. The assertive aspect of the 77 will be an intellectual elitist, prolonged fantasy spells with no practical benefit, martyrdom, self-creative realities used as an escapist justification, negative criticism of social change, lives in idealized state, extremists, and thought and action, overtaxing of emotions. The harmonious aspect, when that person does finally harmonize those energies, they become a spiritual warrior, possessing the originality of thought to innovate and invent new systems for the benefit of mankind, using intuition with scientific technological support, exploring new theories and philosophies of living, seeking to be released by neighbors from limiting boundaries, seeks to release neighbors from self-limiting boundaries. So 88. 88 is obviously 16, which is another karmic debt number. So take the same thing that I just said about the 77 and apply that to this. So 88 is the number of divine knowing, divine knowledge. The 88's passive energies generally like to resist authority. They distrust promptings of institution or higher consciousness, blaming life setbacks on those in control. This person will have a bad habit of saying it's the government's fault, or it's the Illuminati, or it's my parents, or it's my teacher did this, or whatever. They'll oftentimes be caught up in head games created by themselves. These people will be very, very ungracious in defeat, very sore losers. They can be fraudulent and exaggerate credentials, being oblivious to others' inner convictions and feelings. The assertive aspects of the 88 has a power complex, maintaining a slightly haughty arrogance, separating oneself from others, likes to challenge people in positions of authority in the extreme, and can be very, very destructive, intellectual arrogance, devious in attempting to get to the top, has a tendency to be a little bit of a know-it-all, destructive, attacks against religious and ideological institutions. This is the kind of person that you might see start a rebellion. But when this number finally harmonizes again, this is a person that can teach universal law and understanding and improve management skills of everybody around them. They are very good at delegating authority in a way that gives each person his or her own sense of power to work to find cooperation with the highest laws of mathematics. A leader in metaphysical philosophy, respecting integrity, clarity in developing new ideas and theories of thermodynamics, hydraulics, or engineering. This person has a very, very complex mind. And then with 99, you see the number of universal love. 9 plus 9 is 18. 18 in itself is another big number. 99 is a huge number. This person is very assertive. They want to bend the light to fit personal needs, if you will. Getting trapped in a modicum of syrupy idealism, wanting to be seen as an ideal lover while denying obvious selfish motives. They'll use group dynamics to avoid self-responsibility. They have this tendency to struggle to recognize and express their true feelings because they're so good at putting up faulty ones and practical strategies for impersonal relationships. When you see this number in its passive state rather than its assertive state, you see somebody who has a difficulty giving up me time for thee time. Very, very easily mired in false arena of self-pain, hurt, or rejection and denial, unable to see that this person, the individual possessing the number, is actually the creator of their own paradigm and universe, therefore the creator of the misery, frustration, and imperfections that they see around them, smiling politely while secretly resentful of others' happiness and joy. Having a tendency to be gloomy, a very accomplished martyr, benefiting by seeing outside professional help. But when this number finally harmonizes, it's a truly beautiful thing. This person has learned the ultimate trust, the ultimate love, having a glimpse of the greater plan for the planet, and always working, driving to bring the higher light to humanity, learning to release and let go of any personal illusions. A true master teacher of self-awareness education must learn to open the heart, center, in practical ways, working with the pulse of Mother Earth, a visionary in one's chosen path of life. So again, yeah, that's a pretty big number as well. So again, with the master numbers, I want to note that, go through stages in life where it's not activated at all, and then it's overactive, and eventually when you've experienced both of those poles, you learn to find the middle, and when that middle harmonization has been found, it unlocks things that can change the world if people let it, but it all starts with knowing the self. Being very, very self-aware, being aware of what it is that we're supposed to do in our lives. I hope that this was helpful for you, whether you personally or somebody who is in possession of master numbers and are kind of curious as to either what stage of activation that number is, how to get it to harmonize, or how to work with those around you in possession of those energies, especially when they're not in their harmonized state. It can be very, very difficult to live with and experience and walk through, a definite struggle, to say the least. Again, I want to thank you for joining with me today at the Academy of the Magical Art, and until next time, blessed be.